We saw a lantern swinging between the trees, but no hand held it. It moved with the slow, deliberate rhythm of a pendulum, forward, back, forward, casting a dull amber glow that barely reached the trunks around it. The rest of the forest swallowed the light greedily, leaving the surrounding woods in layered black. For a long moment, none of us spoke. The air had turned sharp and metallic, cold enough that each breath felt like it scraped the inside of my lungs. Fog slid low across the ground in thin sheets, curling around exposed roots and rocks. The smell of damp bark and old leaves hung heavy, almost sweet with rot. "That's not ours," Priya said quietly. We were 5 miles off trail, part of a volunteer search team combing the national forest for a missing backpacker. Radios crackled at our belts, but the signal had been degrading for the past hour. Static blooming between half-words until command sounded like voices underwater. Marcus adjusted the strap on his pack. "Could be another team." "No," I said. The lantern's movement wasn't random. It didn't sway with wind, there was no wind. The trees stood rigid and unmoving, their branches interlocked like clasped fingers overhead. The lantern swung at a steady, measured tempo. It would drift forward a few feet, pause as if considering, then sway again, like it was waiting. Behind us, the forest exhaled, a low, collective creak of wood shifting under strain. Pine needles whispered against one another, though nothing stirred them. "Maybe it's hung from something," Priya said, squinting. The lantern drifted sideways between two trunks. It did not snag. It did not collide. It adjusted its height precisely to avoid a low branch, dipping just enough to clear it. Marcus's jaw tightened. "Okay, that's not wind." The light brightened slightly, not enough to illuminate the trees, but enough to catch the wet sheen of bark. The trunks were deeply furrowed, their ridges black and glistening as if lacquered. Moss clung in thick pads, damp and spongy. The ground under our boots felt wrong, soft, compressing too easily, as though we stood on layered fabric instead of soil. The lantern moved again, forward, away from the direction we'd been sweeping. Priya swallowed. "We should radio it in." I reached for mine. Static. Then a voice. Faint, distorted. "Light, follow." Sounded like Eli, our missing hiker. Marcus's head snapped up. "You heard that too?" The lantern flared brighter, then dimmed, then flared again, like a heartbeat. The forest responded. Branches overhead shifted, not swaying but bending, subtly repositioning to frame the light. Shadows stretched toward it, elongated and unnatural, pointing like black fingers. "It's leading us," Priya whispered. Her voice came back a half-second later from somewhere deeper in the woods. "Leading us." The echo didn't match her tone. The lantern drifted farther. I felt the pull of it, not curiosity, not hope. Something lower. A tightening in my chest that insisted movement was necessary. That standing still was dangerous. Marcus took a step. The ground behind him sank slightly, as though relieved of weight. "Don't," I said, but I stepped too. The forest closed behind us without noise. The narrow path we'd carved through bramble and brush seemed to soften and blur, branches knitting together seamlessly. When I glanced back, I couldn't tell where we'd come from. The lantern paused, waiting. Priya's breathing quickened. "We're off-grid now. This isn't search protocol. We might be walking away from the trail entirely," I said. The lantern tilted toward the right, as though turning its attention to me. Then it drifted forward again. We followed, not because we agreed to, because stopping felt worse. The temperature dropped with each step. Fog thickened, rising from ankle height to our knees. It carried a smell like extinguished candles, burnt wick and cold smoke. The lantern's glow sharpened, edges crisp now, illuminating details in flashes. A tree with bark peeled back in long vertical strips. A deer skeleton arranged too neatly beneath a pine. Initials carved into wood that seemed older than the trees themselves. "Eli," Marcus called suddenly. The lantern stopped. The forest went utterly silent. No creak, no whisper, no breath. Marcus turned in a slow circle. Eli, if that's you. From somewhere to our left, a voice answered. I'm here. It was Eli's voice. Soft, tired, came from the wrong direction. The lantern swung once, twice, then drifted toward the voice. Priya grabbed Marcus's sleeve. No, but he pulled free. That's him. The voice came again, closer now. I can see the light. The lantern brightened in response. The fog parted slightly, revealing a clearing ahead. A shallow basin ringed by tall, skeletal trees. Their trunks leaned inward at identical angles, like an amphitheater. The lantern floated to the center and stopped. The swinging ceased. It hovered perfectly still. The silence there felt ancient, heavy. We stepped into the clearing. The ground was bare soil, dark and damp, free of leaves. The air felt older, colder. The trees around the rim loomed high, their branches interwoven to form a rough circle overhead. No stars visible. The lantern lowered itself, touched the ground. The light changed. Amber shifted to pale white, harsh, unnatural. The shadows snapped outward, stretching along the tree trunks. In that sudden clarity, we saw them. Figures, not fully formed. Impressions pressed into bark. Human shapes emerging subtly from wood grain. Faces just beneath the surface, mouths half open, eyes closed. Dozens. Their forms followed the vertical lines of the trunks, as if they had grown there. Priya staggered back. Oh God! The voice of Eli whispered again. I'm here, came from above us. We looked up. A shape hung in the interwoven branches, too high to see clearly, but wrong in its angles. Limbs bent too far, head tilted unnaturally. The lantern flared brighter. The bark around the clearing rippled. The faces in the trees opened their eyes. They were hollow. The voice changed. No longer Eli's. They come when the light calls. The lantern rose slowly, ascending toward the shape in the canopy. Its purpose settled into my chest like a stone. It wasn't guiding us to Eli. It was gathering. Marcus stepped backward, but the soil shifted beneath him, rising slightly behind his heels, nudging him forward again. The forest did not chase. It adjusted. Priya turned to run. The trees leaned inward. The clearing tightened by inches. The lantern hovered beneath the canopy figure. The white light intensified, revealing its shape fully now. A body suspended in branches, skin drawn tight and pale, eyes empty sockets. Its hands were fused to the wood, fingers elongated and bark textured. Its mouth opened, and the lantern's light poured into it. The figures in the trunks inhaled simultaneously. The ground pulsed once. Marcus gasped. His shadow peeled away from his feet. It stretched toward the nearest tree, climbing the bark like smoke. No, I whispered. The lantern descended. It floated between us again. The light softened back to amber, warm, inviting. Behind it, the clearing widened slightly, just enough to suggest escape. The forest had learned our fear. It would adjust. Don't look at it, Priya said hoarsely. But the lantern dipped forward, toward the deeper woods. And from somewhere ahead, Eli's voice called once more. Clear. Alive. I see the light. The lantern swung gently. Waiting. Behind us, bark creaked. New faces were forming. Something scraped symbols into the dirt behind us, erasing our footprints. The sound came first. A dry, deliberate dragging, like a stick pulled slowly through damp soil. We froze mid-step. The forest had been quiet before. Now it was silent in a way that felt constructed. No wind moved through the canopy. No insects trembled in the undergrowth. Even the distant river we'd been following seemed to hush itself. Caleb turned slowly. Did you hear? I heard it, Mara whispered. We all looked back at the stretch of trail we'd just crossed. Our footprints were gone. In their place, the forest floor lay smooth and dark, the loam freshly turned. Pine needles had been brushed aside with careful precision. Across that flattened strip ran a series of markings, curved lines intersecting with sharp angles, spirals breaking into jagged strokes. The soil was damp enough to hold detail. Each groove was clean-edged, intentional. The marks weren't random. They were arranged in sequence, like writing. "That wasn't there," Caleb said. His voice felt too loud. It seemed to strike the trees and fall straight down rather than echo outward. The air smelled of wet bark and decomposing leaves, thick and metallic at the back of my throat. We had been following the old logging path for nearly an hour, volunteering with a search and rescue group after a solo camper went missing 2 days earlier. The trail had been easy to track, fresh prints in the mud, broken twigs, the occasional orange ribbon from previous teams. Now the ground behind us looked untouched, not just smoothed over, rewritten. Mara crouched, studying the symbols. Fog coiled low around her boots, thin tendrils sliding over the soil as though tasting the grooves. "They're layered," she said quietly. "Some are deeper than others. Like emphasis." Caleb shot her a look. "Don't tell me you think this is... what, a warning?" Before she could answer, the scraping sound came again. Closer. We spun around. Ahead of us, the path curved gently between dense trunks. The forest pressed close here, bark dark and ridged, moss slick against the wood. The canopy knitted overhead, filtering sunlight into dim green shafts. Nothing moved, but the earth at the edge of the trail shifted. Just slightly, as if something beneath it had exhaled. "Okay," Caleb said, forcing a laugh that didn't hold. "Animals dig. Wind reshapes soil." "There's no wind," I said. The scraping resumed directly behind us this time. We turned too late. A final line carved itself into the soil where our last footprints had been. The dirt parted cleanly, though nothing touched it. The groove formed with patient care, curling into the existing sequence. The symbol completed something. The fog thickened, rising to our calves. The smell of damp earth intensified, fresh and raw, like a grave newly opened. Caleb stepped backward and paused. "Wait," he said. His eyes tracked the line of symbols trailing behind us. They did not remain confined to that patch of earth. They extended farther back, fading into the dimness between trees. They had been forming for longer than we realized. "Those are ours," Mara whispered. I followed her gaze. The symbols weren't random placements. They followed the pattern of our path. Every step we'd taken had been replaced by a mark. The forest wasn't erasing us. It was recording us, or translating us. The silence deepened. Even our breathing seemed reluctant to continue. Caleb shook his head. "We're leaving. Now." He turned to retrace our route. The trees shifted. Not dramatically, just a collective lean. Trunks angled inward by degrees, narrowing the corridor we'd walked. Branches lowered, knitting together overhead more tightly. The filtered light dimmed further, green fading toward gray. The trail behind us no longer looked like a path. It looked like a seam, stitched shut with symbols. Mara stood slowly. "It doesn't want us going back." "And you know that how?" Caleb snapped. The ground ahead of him rippled. A shallow line etched itself into the soil at his feet. Not random. An arrow, pointing forward. Caleb staggered back as though struck. The fog pulsed outward, responding to his fear. It rose to our knees now, curling around us in slow spirals. "It's guiding us," Mara said. "No," I said, a cold certainty settling into my chest. "It's directing us." The scraping resumed, but this time it didn't stay behind. Lines formed ahead of us as well, carving into untouched ground. The soil parted in smooth strokes, revealing darker layers beneath. The marks arranged themselves into larger patterns, circular shapes intersected by vertical slashes. They felt older than language, older than thought. My vision flickered. For a heartbeat, I saw not soil but skin, thin and pale, etched with the same grooves. The image vanished when I blinked. "Do you feel that?" Mara murmured. The air had grown heavier, pressing against my ears. A low vibration hummed beneath the surface of things, too low to hear but strong enough to sense in my bones. Caleb grabbed my arm. We run. He lunged forward off the marked trail into denser brush. The forest responded instantly. Roots surfaced from the soil like knuckles. The ground tilted subtly, guiding his steps back toward the marked path. His boots slipped, sliding across moss-slick wood until he stumbled directly into the next symbol. The moment his foot touched it, he froze. Not rigid, but paused as though confused. "Caleb," Mara said. He blinked. His voice faltered. We should follow it." Mara and I exchanged a look. "That's not what you just said," I whispered. He frowned faintly. "Yes, it is." Behind him, new symbols carved themselves into the earth. They formed a tighter circle around where he stood. The scraping was no longer distant. It vibrated through the ground beneath us. Mara stepped carefully around a marking. The soil beneath her boot softened, sinking slightly. A new line etched itself along the edge of her footprint before she lifted her foot. When she did, the print vanished, replaced by another symbol. Her name, not written in letters, but I recognized it. A shape that matched the rhythm of her stride, the curve of her shoulders, the cadence of her speech. The forest wasn't just recording us. It was defining us. Caleb moved again, slower now. His steps aligned perfectly with the arrow shapes. He no longer resisted the direction. "Caleb," I said sharply. He didn't answer. More symbols formed around him, layering over the earth like roots spreading. They crept up his boots, faint grooves appearing in the leather as though pressed from within. Mara gasped. The marks were transferring. Thin lines traced along Caleb's skin where his socks met his ankles. He didn't seem to feel it. The forest floor rippled outward from him, a pulse traveling through soil and root. The trees leaned closer. Watching, the vibration intensified. My thoughts felt heavier, slower. When I tried to remember the trailhead, the parking lot, the map in my pack, those memories blurred at the edges. In their place, images of the symbols rose unbidden. I understood them in flashes. They weren't warnings. They were coordinates. The forest wasn't tracking our path. It was plotting our integration. "Don't step on them," Mara breathed. Too late. The ground shifted under her feet. A spiral formed where she stood, encircling her boots. She swayed, her eyes unfocused. "I think," she murmured. "I think it knows our shapes." The soil beneath us softened further, warm and pliant. My boots sank half an inch. The scraping sound stopped. Total silence fell. Then, slowly, a final symbol carved itself at the center of the path. It was larger than the others. A closed circle. Within it, 3 smaller marks. We stood exactly where they would fit. The realization hit like cold water. "We're the last lines," I whispered. Caleb smiled faintly. Not at me, at the ground. The circle beneath us deepened. The soil parted gently around our feet, not swallowing, not dragging, just holding, claiming. The trees leaned in unison, their bark ridges forming faint echoing grooves that matched the symbols below. The forest exhaled. And behind us, far down the trail, new footprints appeared in the damp earth. Fresh, crisp, leading toward the markings, as if someone else had just arrived. And something beneath the soil began to scrape again.